So welcome everybody to it's the second hour time slot. Dr. Tim's on vacation, so he's not been doing his first hour this week. Hope he's having a good time and safe travels. And this is the second hour time slot for Mindshifters Radio. And today is Wednesday, June the 18th, 2025. And we're glad that you're with us. Several people are still popping in. And I'll just say that I've been, myself and a couple of the guys that are helping us do the conversions have been busy working. We now have on YouTube and on the website the AA shows the comparison. We did a full week back in 2015 and 20.
Whole year?
Yeah. Well, no, he's working on that now, the whole year of Recovery Wednesdays. But there was like a solid week that we did with Gail on the comparisons with the AA and the 12-step program. And then we started doing I believe that was the end of December and the first week of January of 2014, 2015, 2015, 2016. I don't remember. And now he is, the other gentleman is doing the Recovery Wednesdays, which were a whole year every Wednesday. And so we're getting those converted and getting them up on YouTube and on the website. And then I have started working on the Aramaicisms, where we did Aramaic Fridays with Dale Allen Hoffman every Friday for a full year. And all of those were still pointing back to Blog Talk, and the gentleman had not gotten that far yet in the conversions. So I started working on them the other day, and I've got January and February of that year, and that was of 2014.
Awesome.
So some of the older shows are now popping up. So if you're a follower on YouTube, you're probably getting a lot of notifications that there's a new show out there or whatever, and they're really the old ones. But anyway, we are getting those done. And Michael, I do have an email from someone with a question for the show, but I don't know if you want to do something else first.
Great. The only thought I have is, if you would, everybody that's listening or listens in the future, if you'd keep passing on the links so that people have access to the shows, can listen to them in archives. I know we get a lot more listens in the archives than we do on the show itself. So we're about passing it on and appreciate your support in doing that.
Are you ready for the question?
Let's go for it.
Okay, it's Melissa, and she said her life is so full right now trying to take care of her mom and her mom's health. Her mom actually has surgery on Friday. So she hasn't been able to join the live shows, but she listens to the archives every night on YouTube, and said the last one that was posted brought up a question for her. She said, you mentioned on the show about getting to a point, a still point. You are first time, and it sounded like a tape recorder on high speed. Oh, your first time, and you were able to slow it down and understand it. At times while meditating, my version of meditating basically is relaxing, breathing, and letting my mind shut down. I say it's connecting to my inner self. At times I've had so many different experiences while meditating. They've all been good. Sometimes I have seen a white screen in my mind that shows me things, whether it's a change that I need to make in me or something that's going to happen, or even when someone was going to die, even showing me a slot machine that I should play next time that I go to the casino. And I listen to it and I play it and I win. It's a variety of things, but it always betters my mind, body, or life in some way, and is always a good experience. But occasionally I get nothing, a complete blank for long periods, and then I get a buzzing in my whole head. I described it as sounding like I was standing under a large tree full of cicadas, making that loud buzzing sound that they make. But it's really, really loud, and I hear it and I feel it. It's almost overwhelming, but it's also amazing. I've always described it as I'm connecting to the ether. It's an amazing feeling and an amazing place to be. I just don't want to leave it. I call it the Nexus, which is a Star Trek reference. I don't want to leave it and always hope that I get to go there again. Yet I don't have that control. I feel better inside and out every way afterwards. Anyway, my question is, do you suppose that's a download like you were talking about? And if so, how can I go about slowing it down to understand it better?
Well, first of all, I'll offer we have a different way of winning in the casino, and we always win 100% of the time when we're in Las Vegas. And that is, we just don't ever go into the casinos or put money in the machine. So it's a different way of winning than you have. But hey, and I'll pass on that other one. But sounds like fun. My take would be, when when you go to the definition of Ruka de Kucha, when you're using the breath, Ruka de Kucha in Aramaic, it is the breath, and it is defined as a feminine elemental force that undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth. I would offer that as the objective of meditation. Actually, when I first discovered and started to work with and teach still point breathing, I almost called it still point meditation. But I wanted to distinguish it from, the myriad of meditation practices that are out there. But to me, meditation is a way of connecting to Ruka. And, one of the things that we do in our intuitive development intensive is that it's an experiential type of thing, but what we do is we will have two people who are interacting, working with each other, and we'll invite them to experience in ways that their intellect are not used to experiencing. Like, for instance, an animal, and experience the animal rather than as this visual picture of the animal, experience it as a color, as a shape. And that there are many different ways to receive information aside from our five senses. And the listening and building the brain cells for what the communication is, that's what I hear you asking about. And it's just there's no magic formula that I know of. It's just a process. And as you get a sense, as you get an experience that comes differently than it has before. One of the other things I've talked about on the show recently is that I've been recognizing that pulses in my structure are forms of communication. So whenever I have an unusual pulse happening, and I'm not talking about a blood pulse, I'm talking about what might be called a therapeutic pulse, is I always listen for what's the download, what's the information behind this. And sometimes I understand it, and sometimes I don't have a clue. And I've had a few occasions where I've asked, and I've seen things that were so far out of where my brain cells are, from what brain cells I have, that I didn't even recognize it. I had no clue. I knew I was looking, not with my eyes, but looking at something, but had no way to describe it or comprehend it or understand it. And what I've done with those sorts of experiences, just put it on the shelf to, okay, so I'll build the brain cells for this. Ruka, teach me what this means. Show me what it is I need to learn, and or help me build the brain cells to be able to bring into my mind the experience that I'm having. Oftentimes people talk about a spiritual experience, or they'll have a spiritual experience and then they'll go to talk about it and they're speechless because it's something that doesn't relate to what our five senses show us. So if I were you, I'd just be patient with that. It sounds like you're having some sweet energies with it. I'd be patient, and I'd just keep asking Ruka to show me, teach me. Is there something for me to learn here? Is there something for me to understand? And then, engaging with this work to me is about building the brain cells. And when I talk about building brain cells, I'm not talking about building new physical structure. I'm talking about having the eyes to see, the ears to hear, having information stored in my cellular structure that can assist me to decode something. If I took a child of 3 and sat them in physics lecture on dark holes, and then afterward asked them to give me a paper on the meaning of dark holes in space, the 3-year-old probably wouldn't have much to say. But if I had the 3-year-old and then, 5 and 10 and 12 and now starting to understand physics and energy and electronics, and 18 and gets a PhD in physics, now that person has the brain cells to be able to give me the dissertation that I asked for. And so I think that when we enter new realms, we're oftentimes like the 3-year-old. I don't have any brain cells for this. I don't even know how to start to comprehend this. And as you ask to be taught, then you build the brain cells, and there's a way of knowing. There's an experience of knowing when you're on target. And that's one of the objectives of the intuitive development intensive, is to build the brain cells, especially where I know I've had the experience over and over through the practicum of, oh, that was off base. I know what it feels like when my mind is making it up. And I got the feedback from my partner that's right on. Oftentimes we'll see people doing the exercise in the intuitive development. One part will say, well, I never told you that. How did you know that about me? And, they've gone back to something that happened in their lives or whatever. And it's not a psychic thing that we're looking for, but rather an intuitive process. And, it's a process of building brain cells. That'd be my input on it. Hope that helps.
I just sent her a reply to her email that she can listen to the show when I get it up on YouTube tonight.
Cool. Awesome. Well, anything else there?
Nope, that's it.
Well, then I'll just say welcome to everybody. Delighted that you're here. And wondering if anyone has anything on their minds. Anything, a couple of folks are here that did the still point session with us on Monday. So I'm wondering if anyone has any dreams to report, anything unusual moving for you in the realm of dreams or your life, or just open that space for that conversation. If anybody has anything, then hit your unmute button and say hello. Or if you have any questions, thoughts on any of the topics we've covered or not yet covered. Well, if we have no other thoughts, I'm going to I came across an interesting quote, or actually it's kind of a synthesis of the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. And I was shocked at how it parallels Carl Jung. And it becomes, it ties right in this particular piece of information or thought ties right in with the personal code evaluation that we do. And, the personal code evaluation is a device that we developed to give people feedback. It's based on the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, which is kind of the gold standard of psychological testing. It's based on that, and it breaks people's personal code down into 10 areas and shows where weaknesses are or where there's some work to be done. But as I read this statement from Nietzsche, aside from hearing echoes of Carl Jung, I hear the idea of, or the understanding of what a poor personal code does to us. And he says this: invisible chains are often the strongest, not because they bind the body, but because they shape the soul. And if you think about, we've all had children or grandchildren or what have you, and I'm sure everyone will remember the time when you bought your child a little toy. It was usually made of wood, and it had several different shapes of blocks, and there were several different openings in the toy, and only the square block would fit in the square opening, and only the oblong block would fit in the oblong, and only the round one would go through the round, etc. And the personal code is very much like that. And when Nietzsche says it shapes the soul, if you think about the Harvard research that we quote so often, that says that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, the maximum amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. And I would compare that idea of 9 bits in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing. There are only 9 openings, a max. The actual lab stats were 7 plus or minus 2. So it's as little as 5, as much as 9 bits of data. But if you think of that in terms of this child's game with the blocks, that when our personal code, when the brain cells we have in carbon-based memory, generationally installed in the mind and too often never thought through, but just reinforced and played out over and over and over again in systems of thought that are just unconscious and without true self-awareness or the ability to assess what perception is doing, that the perceptual mind is what I hear Nietzsche referring to here. And he calls what I would refer to as a poor personal code, he calls it invisible chains. And of course, we know that when there is a disintegrative energy in a cell, the cell itself is diseased. And with this quote, he's basically saying, yeah, you got a physical disease, but so what? That's not what's really important. What's really important is that it shapes your soul. And I would hear that as a poor personal code, one that's filled with hostility and fear and guilt and rage and sadness, all those things unreviewed and unresolved. I think back to my childhood, and I have words that come to mind that I find abhorrent, but and I've said to myself over and as a kid, why did we ever even hear those words? Why does our culture even do that to a kid? And or a parent that uses certain phrases with hostility that a child hears them over and over and over again. It becomes part of the regulatory speech system, and it becomes that kind of chain. And the shapes, so to speak, of those 9 openings at any given moment in the mind will, until we go in and take charge of our minds and clean them up, they will tend to reflect as the expression of our being, of our soul. And then Nietzsche goes on, and this is where he ties into Jung. He says, what you refuse to face within commands you from the shadows. Much like Jung said, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our lives, and we'll call it fate. What you refuse to face within commands you from the shadows, and it forms the openings in the mind through which perception can come. And the distortions are just, such a myriad of distortions. So our mental constructs take on the shape of our unconscious mental deformities. Basically, that's what I hear Nietzsche saying here. And that deforms a whole life. That rather than being a reflection of the created self, and the reason I'm bringing this up, because I think it's another way to look at and to see what this work is really about, another perspective on building the brain cells for what this work is really about. My take is that our physiology, our perception, our minds, the blocks in our mind that determine, or the shapes in our mind that determine what our perception can show us, are designed to be a reflection of our created selves of love. But with the world, especially with as many people as are card-carrying members of the one world universal religion of guilt, fault, blame, shame, and suffering, that structure becomes a reflection of this false, twisted fear and hostility-based self. So it to me just reinforces the importance of understanding where we're going, understanding the weaknesses in our own personal code, and then confronting one's own unconscious drives, weaknesses, and hidden motivations, being able to embrace, to look at, and that genius piece of information that was given to us 2,000 years ago by Yeshua, that collapses if you imagined this child, the metaphor for this would be, imagine you've got this child's toy, it's got the round opening and the square opening and the oblong opening and the rectangular opening. Imagine that for an instant, that all of where those openings are was just one open space that anything could pass through, including and especially truth. So hammering out, operating with forgiveness, and hammering out the kinks in our perceptual mind, rather than denying and dissociating from aspects of ourselves, leads to us gaining power over this, what for most people is this unacknowledged shadow realm. Both, and I haven't really looked at how Nietzsche's work relates to Jung. Jung speaks of the shadow as well. I'm not sure which of them originated that term or whether they originated independent of each other. But to to free ourselves of self-deception, and the biggest self-deception, of course, is denial. What's our definition of denial? When I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me, I'm now instructing my mind to dissociate. I'm in denial, and I'm instructing my mind to dissociate from the very thing that I need to gain power over. So psychological honesty is so important here, and the warning against self-deception. If hostility or fear is moving and we lose ourselves in self-deception, i.e., we've got one of those blocks, one of those openings, and whenever something comes along that we don't like, that's in our own psychological makeup, our own emotional makeup, our mind turns to projection, and our mind turns to how this is somebody else's fault. They're making me feel this way. This is all their fault. And to me, it points out the urgency of really freeing oneself of self-deception and recognizing that whenever anything other than love, whenever any form of hostility or fear is active, and of course it's often going to be unconscious, it takes us out of the ability to choose, and the mind becomes a vehicle for the expression of unresolved unconscious family dynamics, especially the power person dynamic. And of course, there's a factor in that. There's not only the family influence, but of course the culture, the established systems in the culture, which, just turn on the TV and you'll notice that hostility, fear, and blame have become the norm. When was the last time you heard a politician stand up and say, I did this, I made this error, and I'm responsible? No, it's usually, it doesn't matter what it is. Somebody doesn't know anything about what happened. They just hear that something terrible happened, and it's obviously, somebody from the other side of the aisle. And that's such a form of intellectual dishonesty. And as Nietzsche said, it forms the soul. Or I should say, it deforms the soul. Now, of course, the soul always remains intact. I wouldn't quite agree with him that it deforms the soul, but it deforms the expression and moves us out of this expression of active present love that we're designed to have fuel everything, into this hostility and fear that, and most everybody who first would contact an idea like that would say, well, Well, but that's normal, Michael. I mean, that's nothing wrong with that. That's just the way it is. Well, that is the way it's become, but I'll tell you what, it's insane. The established, the fact that by the age of 4, I mean, listen to the child of 4, and they've already learned that if there's something that they're about to be held responsible or accountable for, they'll turn around and they'll have the language of blame. And a whole self is formed out of this blame game, this thinking and speaking as though something outside of us is the cause of what's moving inside of us, rather than stepping into truly wholesome intellectual honesty, which allows one to, perhaps for the first time, begin to see the parts of themselves that need to be overcome, the parts that need to be shifted and changed and healed. So, you go back to Yeshua and he talks about, and the reward, I mean, it's pretty powerful and profound. When he speaks about this overcoming, and that I would offer is the overcoming of one's own lower nature, one's own deformed self or false self. And if we deny or ignore or project it, then now that has power over us. And Yeshua says that's what kills us. When you decode what he says, if you overcome it, what does he say? To he or she that overcomes, they will not taste of the second death. They will become a pillar in the temple of my God. And of course, the temple is not, someplace in Jerusalem. That's your own body. They will become a pillar. That is a fixture, and literally says, and shall go out no more. What does going out mean? It means death. If we're willing to become radically honest, psychologically honest with ourselves, emotionally honest with ourselves, and where there's a conflict, step up to the plate with ownership of whatever's going on in the mind. Everybody goes into a fit of rage, always has a whole story and excuse. When you start to say to yourself, when your rage comes up, this is my mental illness, rather than tell yourself a story about somebody else, you're starting to move into honesty. And now you take the mind out of the state of blockage of truth and you put it into the space where truth becomes available. When you realize this, 10,000 brain cells firing 9 bits of data are all we're aware of in that particular time frame. And if one's mind is filled with 9 bits of data, and I'll say, if accompanying that there's any form, even the slightest form of hostility or fear, where the downfall is in that is the perceptual construct of the mind at that moment that tells me that it's all your fault that I'm experiencing this, fills this 9-bit mind. If I call that the truth, then truth bounces off of me. There's no room for the evidence. Remember, or recognize that in a time, if in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, you get to see 9 bits of data, sooner you got to acknowledge that what you're seeing is evidence. When you're looking at 9 bits of data out of 10,000 brain cells firing, it's evidence. And, the only thing that we ever get to see evidence of is evidence of our own BS. Of course, that's belief system, right? Everybody has that as the meaning for BS, or do you have a different reality maybe? Hope that makes the point. Yeah, evidence. That's all it is evidence, this 9-bit mind. And when hostility or fear is active in even the subtlest form, my mental illness is active and I'm in blockage of truth. I call what my mind is showing me the truth, and now that 9-bit space is filled with a lie that I call the truth. And until I unblock the mind, things are crazy. And what we deny and dissociate from is the very thing that ends up gaining power over us. And the objective of this work is to reverse that process and step into purposeful, conscious awareness. Because whatever is out of alignment does not flow. When you look at what they call the Lord's Prayer, which is not a prayer at all, but rather is a set of instructions for how to be the space of love in the world. But anything that's out of alignment with that blocks the natural flow of energy, and that blockage will distort not only perception but physiology and reflect as a diseased condition in physiology, i.e., what's the first sign of a diseased condition in physiology? There's pain. Oh, okay. So if there's pain, I need to be asking myself, what is it I'm in denial of? What is it I need to deal with here? What is it I need to look at? And the only thing that can cause pain is that which is of an incoherent energy. Remember David Bohm, the physicist, who offered that the major challenge with human beings is quote unquote sustained incoherence. And his meaning for sustained incoherence is that the only problems that one faces in one's life are the problems that they create within themselves with their thinking. And he interestingly talks about, we've looked at the content of thought, but nobody's ever really looked at the process. The process of thought is a process of creation. So Bohm's sustained incoherence is when I'm off base with my thoughts, and I refuse to own that the result I'm producing that is painful is produced by me, then I go on with the same form of thinking, the same incoherence, and never change it. It's sustained. And once one steps into and comes into deeper alignment, which my offering is, that's exactly what was called the Lord's Prayer was about, was to show us how to orient and align ourselves so that there is vibrational coherence, which is a result of proper alignment of the whole structure. And when there's that alignment, then everything comes into harmony. So that's kind of a summation of where we want to head with this whole body of work. And I wonder if that resonates anything for anybody. And if so, put a hand up. Let's talk about it. What's that resonate for you? Does that make sense? Does that leave you with any questions, any thoughts, any observations of yourself or your process, your work? Talk to me. Put a hand up. Say hello. What's on your mind? Did that make sense was that a coherent piece of information that makes sense for you? I guess would be one of my questions. Anyone have a thought on that? Nobody's going to say a word, eh?
Well, I will.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for that. We were having a conversation this morning in our group about sometimes it's not that the brain cells aren't ready, it's that maybe the emotional body is not ready to approach that shadow side that you were talking about. I don't know if that was Carl Jung or Nietzsche that was talking about the shadow side.
Both, actually.
And I'll give an example. So when I was leaving my husband and we were separating in England, and I decided to come back to the States, and I got custody of my son, who at the time was in third grade. And my daughter, who was a little bit older, she was 17, 18 at the time, decided not to leave. She was going to stay. However, when I took Stefan, there was an 11-year gap between them, and she had really been a second mother to him. And when I took my son back and came back to the US from England,
Mm,
she was very distraught. It took her several years to be able to talk about it a little bit, but she wouldn't really address it, wouldn't really talk about it. And one of the things that she said to me when I said maybe she could go to counseling, there are other things, and I talked to her about uh, stuff that's unhealed, running the unconscious, and she was like, "Why would I want to bring all that up again? I don't want to address that." So I think more than the resistance of the brain cells, I think there's an emotional resistance that's too much to handle, and that sometimes we need to not push it, but just allow it to be that way, and give that person grace and understanding, and just be with them and work on ourselves. So I then, several years later, uh, some of her stuff came up in a different way, but it was all the same stuff. And I felt deeply wounded by that. So I had to look at my wounding. I actually went and had a session with Tim Hayes on it, and he was very helpful for me doing my healing work, which I did. And it was interesting because as I did my healing work around her, what I perceived to be rejection of me, um, I she reached out to me and said, "I want you to come and visit." So we have kind of reestablished a different sort of relationship that is very sweet. And yet we both still have unhealed aspects of ourselves. Um, and I now do not ever mention her doing any healing work,
right.
partly because I see that it's my healing work. And yet, even though she's my daughter and I want her to do this, by just extending her grace, that allows her to rest in a different place, even though she's not doing her work. Do you know what I mean?
I hear you. Yeah. Yeah, I hear
Yeah.
it. I don't know if you remember, but the first night of the intensive, one of the things that I offer to people is that one of the reasons why people don't address and heal the wounds that they have is because the space wasn't safe enough when the wound happened to deal with it. And they're energetically, they don't have a sense that it's safe yet today. And that, I think, becomes a really important key. If and you've given us a really good outline for a perfect understanding of the principles. So she's got this wound. You took her pseudo child away, and therefore she felt wounded by you. And in return, from what I'm hearing, there was a rejection of you that then became your wound. And as long as one or the other of you have not healed fully whatever that energetic interactive dynamic is between you, there isn't the safety in her space for you to express perhaps what's going on for you in rejection, and there isn't the safety in her space to express whatever she has in the way of thought disorders and pain around you having taken away her brother, and not only taken away her brother, quote, son, but taken away her mother. And my take would be the day that one or the other of you becomes safe in regard to that, i.e., that that you are free of any form of blame or retribution energy toward her, and chances are this is not just something between you and she, but is quite possibly a family dynamic that perhaps has been going on in the family system long before she showed up as your daughter, and that event happened. But as one or the other of you does a level of work where energetically one intuitively knows it's safe to speak about, then I would offer that conversation would likely open.
Yeah, that would be good. That safety aspect is something that I've been recognizing in myself recently from doing a lot of this work, and that I have recognized that I've carried within me that it's not safe to be who I really am. And that came out in the breathing on Monday as well, with
Wow.
my whole neck thing and being hung, and for being a free spirit in a past life, and just feeling unsafe now in this political climate, feeling unsafe my whole life as a woman in the patriarchal culture. And I've started to explore this unsafe feeling, and how maybe it has really created my identity here. And
Yeah. It might be worth looking where your words accidentally started to go with explore. It sounded like the word your mind was first serving up was exploit, which might indicate that you've experienced or felt you've been exploited, or perhaps you have been the one who's exploited. But just that your mind comes up with that, thinking in terms of regulatory speech. You know, um,
did I say
Shakespeare.
exploited?
You started with
Oh,
the two. I believe it was the word exploit, and you changed it to explore. There was a little. I mean, you can go back and
I
listen
didn't.
to it and
Yeah,
see.
yeah, I will. I believe you.
But just watching speech, and Shakespeare tells us, "My words fly out, my thoughts remain below." So, and it would make sense that with what you're talking about, if it's a family dynamic, if it's cultural, if it's to do with the patriarch, then exploitation would be a likely uh, experience to be involved, and perhaps wants to surface to be healed.
Yes.
So how
There's
about a
there's a
mind
lot,
shifter?
yeah,
Go ahead.
there's a lot to do next month.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Okay, let's see, I have my pen and paper here for a mind shifter.
Okay. And I just hit, if you look in the chat, it's there.
Oh my
Oh, I
gosh,
misspelled healing.
I get it though.
Yeah. So it'd be good to notice as you're writing, is anything happening with your breath? It kind of looked like, no, there was nothing
Yeah.
happening with your breath, like there wasn't any.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect mind shifter then. So as you write that and pay attention to your breath, let yourself breathe into it and just let whatever is under there that needs to come up to be looked at. And know that when we get together for that quantum still point, that there will be 1000% integrity in the way that you're treated, and you'll be honored, and the space will be safe to open to anything that needs to surface and be worked through.
Thank you.
Yeah. Breathing with you. And Susan, I see you've got a thought in there that you wanted to ask this too. Is there any more to say about that for you, Susan?
Terry was very kind to bring up that question, which was my question in the group. And she gave me a thought, which was.
And what was the question, to be clear?
The question was, is there, I don't remember exactly how, but in my case, it was like, I can't do it. I've been doing your mind shifter. My brain agrees totally with that mind shifter. Let me get that out. It's somewhere in here, and I hope I don't press a wrong button. I do that a lot. Poor Jeannie has let me into the group several times.
That's perfectly fine.
Um, anyway, it started with the frustration and helplessness and inability to do the still point breathing. And my remembering that you said that another word for Satan is the resistor, and so I'm telling myself I'm resisting. I totally agree.
Willingness is a definite key.
Yeah. I don't even know how to put this, but a lot of my reactions didn't seem even appropriate to be on the mind shifter.
How so?
No, not the mind shifter, the still point breathing. I'm not even able to say my words practically.
Well, what that says, Susan, is just things are stirring for you, and that's awesome, because out of stirring will come clarity as you keep moving and keep adding a little more breath and a little more awareness and facing whatever's under the surface. And whatever it is, notice you've got a family and a community of support for being able to embrace it and move through their sail, looking at the logo that you have, that you can sail right through it.
Yeah, my son has a sailboat, and he was dreaming of getting one, and I made that cutout about 2 years before he ever got a boat.
Yeah, cool.
Well, sorry, I don't even know if I just feel as if there is no way to describe how far underwater I am with this ability to breathe properly. And it has to do with self-expression in general. My mother used to say, my mother had a very timid, quiet little mother herself, and her mother was quite sentimental and emotional and expressed her feelings very freely. And my mother found that extremely embarrassing and distasteful for some reason or other. And I know my mother had a lot of feelings. And I have an older sister who is like my mother's mother. And my mother used to say, oh my gosh, my sister's name is Elizabeth, but we called her Toby. And even that is like denying my sister her beautiful name. My mother used to be embarrassed with my sister's expressions of emotion and feeling. So the rest of us learned that that was a bad thing to do. And on occasion, I'll have strong feelings, and my first impulse is to shut them down and be extremely embarrassed. And yet, oddly enough, when someone else is emotionally open, I am so moved by that. I love it so much if it's genuine. Sometimes, like my little sister used crying as a way to get things she wanted and to manipulate people. So that there's that ripple in there too of am I expressing sincere emotions? And I know I'm going in 20 directions here, but I had an experience in a Christian counseling center at one point where I went for counseling. And this woman who claimed to be a psychic and could look through and see what people were really up to told me I was a game player, a mask wearer, and was arrogant. And that was my character. And I felt so slain by her words that I was uncontrollably crying. And the leader of the group came and sat beside me and put her arm around me and said, well, now I can be a mother. And she kind of enjoyed that I was undone. So there's a lot of just feeling of, Carrie was talking about being safe. This isn't something I want to show anybody. But yet on the radio show, I've always felt safe. And I have also cried a couple of times on the radio show. And although I felt embarrassed, it seemed all right. So, I'm just working here, but a lot of the way I feel is so as if it was a climate in the house. It wasn't something anybody could explain. It wasn't something I learned when I was 10. It was like that was the climate in which I was born. And when I try to get back there aren't any words back there. There's no place to put any feet on any ground. So, and you want us to breathe, and I want to say, don't make me do it. Don't make me do that. And don't tell me I'm bad if I don't. So there, I've kind of been a blunderbuss and told you whatever comes to mind.
Go for it. We're here to hold a space, and I have a mind shifter for you, another one to work with. And
Oh,
perhaps this will help to open the root of what that withhold is about, what that unthinkable pain is about.
okay, I'm ready.
So full, free, and honest self-expression is one of the
Right.
things people appreciate and admire about me, especially in my family.
Oh my, that's it.
Say again?
That's it.
Okay. So it's in the notes,
Oh, thank you. That was
in the chat.
fast. Thank you. I'm trying to
Um,
type it and I can go there instead and be lazy. Thank
Full,
you.
free, and honest self-expression is one of the things people most appreciate about me. Pardon me, things people appreciate and admire about me, especially in my family.
Whoa. Well, that ain't the truth, that's for sure.
Okay, so that's the first thing that goes on the right side of the page. And then what I would do is a permutation of that. I do that one first, and then I do a permutation of it when, and at the end, instead of it being especially my family, I'd say especially me.
Okay. I could just add that there.
And the sense I get
What?
is there's a floodgate to open here.
Mm.
And when you open that floodgate, it's going to be so transformative that it'll be beyond belief. So I support you being able to get safe
Well,
enough to open that floodgate.
I can picture doing that on an island somewhere where nobody else lives, but I can't imagine doing it in the world.
So
In
I'd put
fact,
that on the right side of the page.
okay, all right.
Carrie, does that resonate anything for you? Kind of sounds
Yeah,
like
it
you got
does.
your
Yeah.
sisters here that are working on this one and may just be able to coordinate and support of each other here.
Mm.
Yeah, I can do that one.
Carrie, when you talked about your daughter and you have a cordial relationship with her, it sounds as if something's missing in there for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, wow, that's tough. My daughter and I were estranged for 25 years when she married a man who hated me. And that was not, I introduced her husband to her. And they were married for 25 years and had 3 boys. And I was allowed to visit, but I my daughter would stay in touch once a week. She would call, and it was a cordial, distant relationship. And then she divorced him one day, and I knew nothing about this coming. She divorced him and said, Mom, I've been living just a total lie. It's been so hard, but I was so scared for so long. And she and I are very good friends, and I would wish that for you. I thought she'd never be back, but she
Mm.
is back, and I hope your daughter comes back. I don't know how close you were before, but were you close?
Yeah, yeah.
Gosh, that's a heartbreak. Anyway,
So, Susan,
yeah,
are you ready to come back?
back to what? You mean back to our discussion?
No, just the same question you just asked.
Harry,
Carrie, are you ready to come back? Are you willing?
to my mother, no.
Well, we'll just be here holding the space for if and when it's time that opens and it happens. And it happens with grace and ease.
God, Michael, I've never made that connection between my daughter's estrangement from me
Yeah.
and what I did to my mother.
Breathing for you and with you. Breathing with you. Just allow yourself to let your breath move in to your chest, to your body.
Trying to. I'm trying to. Yeah.
And this can be a space where it's just going to take an act of will for you to say, I am going to breathe into this, rather than carry it around.
I'm going to mute myself, okay? You
Okay.
go ahead with stuff.
All right, we'll be holding this space, and we're past 2:00, so I'm just going to say thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we'll hold the space for you to have the best year yet of your